I think I cracked Mitsuki. Again, and I'm sure you guys have seen a multitude of theories saying that Mitsuki was created using Toneri Otsutsuki's DNA, which is why Sage Mode looks similar to Toneri's Tenseigan Chakra Mode. I have a video on that as well. But I have a different theory. What if Mitsuki was created using the remnants of the Ten Tails from the 4th Great Ninja War? Now I know this theory might sound wild, but it does make sense. Now if you go back to Boruto in the Kara Actuation arc, you realize that Orochimaru knows a lot about the Ten Tails, the God Tree, and the Otsutsuki. In fact, he's the one doing the research and feeding the information to Naruto before Amado came into the picture. Now we haven't heard much from Orochimaru ever since Amado came into the picture, but I do believe that we might get back to his character because he is an integral part to the story of Boruto, in my opinion. And this isn't just based on Orochimaru giving Naruto information on the Ten Tails. We've seen Orochimaru in action actually fighting Victor when Boruto fought Deepa. And when this happened, Orochimaru seemed to know a lot about the Ten Tails and the God Tree that Deepa was trying to recreate. In fact, just by looking on the God Tree, he knew that it was just an imitation. He knew that it wouldn't do what Victor wanted it to do. And when the God Tree started to absorb Victor, he didn't seem surprised. It's as if he knew exactly what was about to happen from experience. He then says that no mere human would be able to absorb the power from the chakra fruit created from the actual God Tree. Now this is where Mitsuki comes into play. We know that Mitsuki is an artificial human. He was created by Orochimaru with immense power. We've seen Mitsuki use his Sage Mode power before, and even Oroshiki Otsutsuki says that is something he hasn't seen before. So this shows that this power is something new. Now when it comes to the similarities between Mitsuki and Toneri, it's mostly at face value. They look very similar based on their designs, especially when Toneri is in his Tenseigan mode and Mitsuki is in his Sage Mode. Now the same thing can be said for Mitsuki and the Ten Tails. Now of course the Ten Tails doesn't have green chakra emitting from its body, but if you look at Mitsuki's eye area, you can see that he has this black marking or this damp area with cracks running from it all over his face. Now if you compare that to the Ten Tails from the Naruto era, he had this similar feature as well. He had the black marking around his eyes and the cracks running from that black marking all over his face. Or its face. We don't know if it's a he or she, but that's kind of irrelevant. But back to the point. Now when it comes to Mitsuki in his Sage transformation, he also has a horn in the middle of his forehead. And one thing we know is that when Kaguya ate the chakra fruit, she also developed horns. And when Madara and Obito became Ten Tails Jinchurikis, they also developed horns on their foreheads, and it wasn't similar to Kaguya's horns. They developed horns specifically for them. Now the same thing could be said for Mitsuki. When Orochimaru took the Ten Tails and used it as the source material, which we're gonna get into, to create Mitsuki, this explains why Mitsuki has Sage powers and also why he has a horn and his Sage Mode looks similar to the Ten Tails. Now the reason why this explains why Mitsuki has Sage powers is because the Ten Tails is basically just a clump of natural energy, at least the Ten Tails from Naruto. Because the Ten Tails absorbed all the natural energy from the planet, it has the ability to do so passively. Once the Ten Tails is on the ground, it's able to connect its roots all over the planet and then just absorbs the natural energy and the innate energy from everyone on the planet and uses that energy to create the chakra fruit. This is why the Ten Tails is a clump of natural energy, as stated by Naruto during the 4th Great Ninja War when he tried to sense the power of the Ten Tails. And because the source material that created Mitsuki was the Ten Tails genetics or the Ten Tails DNA, this explains why Mitsuki is able to passively absorb nature energy to fuel his Sage Mode. Now of course Mitsuki's Sage Mode was also influenced by Orochimaru's Snake Sage powers or Kabuto's Snake Sage powers, since Orochimaru never really mastered Snake Sage Mode. Kabuto was the only one ever capable of doing that, which he showcased during the battle between Itachi and EMS Sasuke during the war. So what this means is that Mitsuki's power is a combination of the Ten Tails genetics and also Kabuto's Snake Sage Mode or Kabuto's Snake Sage Mode cells. This is why Mitsuki's Sage Mode is so different from every other Sage Mode ever invented or ever used in the series, and this explains why this power is so new to Oroshiki, who knows everything about the planet because he was a scout, he watched everything, but he didn't know about this Sage Mode because this is something brand new. This is something created by Orochimaru. Now if we go back to the one-shot created by Kishimoto where he introduced Mitsuki's Sage Mode, there was this interesting conversation between Mitsuki and Log. Now, this entire conversation was planned by Orochimaru and the log. Now, you could say that because it was planned, then he's not necessarily telling the truth. But I personally believe that some of what he said was in fact true. Now, if you go to the one shot, we have the conversation between Mitsuki and Log. And Log says that we're both artificial beings created by Orochimaru, vessels to fulfill his ambitions. Now, the vessel's talk is now linking them back to the Karma Seal and the Otsutskis, because you know that Otsutskis use the Karma Seal to create vessels. And Orochimaru was using Mitsuki to create a vessel for himself because he himself couldn't handle the power he was trying to create, which is why he created the perfect body to do so. The perfect body was Mitsuki. Even though we learned later on in the anime that Mitsuki's body isn't technically perfect and it still can't handle the power. So yeah, Orochimaru basically failed in that experiment. Now we could wait until like later on in the series, as in the time skip, to see if Mitsuki does get an upgrade so they can finally use this power to its fullest potential. But we'll just have to wait and see. But as this conversation goes, we have Locke telling Mitsuki that Suki is an old name for a vessel, and Mi is the 6th of the 12 zodiac creatures, the snake. That's where our name Mitsuki, or snake vessel, comes from. So Mitsuki technically means snake vessel. Now, as I said earlier, this entire scenario was a plan concocted by Orochimaru and the Locke to see if Mitsuki would choose his own way and not listen to either of them, and that's what they wanted to happen. When Mitsuki did that, they had this very interesting conversation. And Orochimaru said that, so not as a vessel in subterranean darkness, but as a moon in the darkness of the night sky. I don't consider what I do pretending to be a god. I feel I'm just expanding on what they've granted us. That's all. Now, the interesting thing about this is that you could say, and this might be a reach, that he's referring to the Otsutskis as the gods, and he's just expanding on what they gave to him, as in the power of the Ten Tails, which he's using to create Mitsuki, or as in the power of the Karma Seal, which he somehow has knowledge of. And you know, there's been a lot of theories out there saying that his Curse Seal was created after the Karma Seal, and he knew about the Karma Seal, which is why he created the Curse Seal and all that jazz. Now, I'm not fully on board on that theory, but it may make sense if they want it to make sense. So I'm not going to rule it out completely. Now, I did mention something earlier about a source material, and this is where it comes from. This is when Locke said that the thing that he's looking for, referring to Orochimaru, is the seed that served as our source material. He cultured it to create us. It's also why you're able to break the barrier around this place. Now, everything, the wording they're using, right, the dialogue, like the verbiage that they're using in this conversation, is somehow and can be linked back to the verbiage used by the Otsutsuki. Cultured, cultivated, the seed, referring to the seedling, which is the Ten Tails. Now, you could say that he found a baby Ten Tails and he used that power, which I highly doubt. It's more likely that he used maybe a seed from one of the sprouts created by the God Tree, which we know exists in the Boruto era, which they showed when Boruto and Konohamaru went on that mission and found a bunch of white Zetsus. So it could be that they're referring to a seed in that regard. But the implication here is that they're somehow linking how they talk about Mitsuki and how he was created and what he came from to how the Otsutskis talk about cultivating the God Tree and creating the chakra fruit and using the Ten Tails as a seedling. So this is why I'm saying that Mitsuki may have come from a seedling of the Ten Tails. Or maybe he came from the remnants of the Ten Tails itself from the Four Great Ninja War. Who knows? But I do believe that there's a lot of evidence to suggest that Mitsuki was in fact created using the power of the Ten Tails, as opposed to the DNA from Tonerio Otsutsuki, which is harder to prove that Orochimaru would get that DNA, since most of the fight that Toneri had was on the moon and not on Earth. So Orochimaru would have had to travel to the moon to get Toneri's DNA and find it in some areas, which would be weird and more harder to prove. Now, it does make more sense that Orochimaru would be able to get the DNA of the Ten Tails from the Four Great Ninja War and use that power to create Mitsuki. It does make more sense that way, in my opinion. But that's it for the theory, guys. If you guys like the theory, let me know in the comment section. Do you guys have anything to add to the theory itself? You can drop that in the comment section as well. If you guys disagree, let me know why and we can talk. I'll probably do a stream tomorrow to discuss it live, and you guys can give your points and so on and so forth, and then we can go over it, of course. But I do believe that it's highly plausible. It might not be the case, but I do think it makes sense. But yeah, if you guys like the video, drop a like. If you're new, subscribe. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.